Hi, thank you for joining me. My name is Mindy Mandell. In this video, I'm going to talk about propositions 108 through 112 in Proclus's Elements of Theology. And this video is part of a series. I will link the playlist here. Throughout this series, I've been using the E.R. Dodds translation, and in the description box you can find a PDF version of the text. All right, let's jump into the text. We got a fun one to start with. Proposition 108. This one reads, every particular member of any order can participate the monad of the rank immediately suprajacent in one of two ways. So first, what do we mean by suprajacent? Well, supra means above, and jacent as in adjacent or next to. So he's talking about participating the monad of the series just above the particular member. So there are two ways, either through the universal of its own order or through the particular member of the higher series, which is coordinate with it in respect of its analogous relation to that series as a whole. And that's a mouthful. I think a diagram would help us here. All right, so let's imagine that this little light represents a participated soul, an individual soul like you or me. And we want to see how the soul can participate the monad intellect, which I'll represent with a bolt of lightning. Now, Proclus is telling us in Proposition 108 that there are two ways that this participation can occur. The first is through the universal of its own order. So in our example, the participated soul would participate in the monad soul, and then the monad would be able to participate in the monad just above it, which would be intellect in this example. Now, the other possibility is for the participated soul to participate in a participated intellect, like a daimon, for example, which can then participate in its own proper monad, in this case, intellect. So either way, the participated soul needs a mediary in order to participate the monad intellect. And to explain why this is so, Proclus is going to remind us of the law of similitude, that participation is through likeness. And this is Proposition 32, which reads, all reversion is accomplished through a likeness of the reverting terms to the goal of reversion. And when we talk about participating in higher realms, we're really talking about reversion. So Proposition 32 is reminding us that there has to be a likeness in the chain of reversion. And now we are seeing that that likeness is either in the rank, such as two participated terms or two monads, or it's a likeness in the series, such as the participated term participating its own proper monad. Okay, let's look at Proclus's explanation. And I think this will be fairly straightforward at this point. It reads, for if all things achieve reversion through likeness, and if the particular member of the inferior order differs from the monadic universal of the superior, both as particular from universal and also by the difference of its order, whereas it resembles the universal of its own series by sharing in the same distinctive character, and it resembles the corresponding term of the immediately suprajacent series in virtue of its analogous place in the procession, then it is plain that the two latter would be the mean terms through which its reversion upon the former can take place, advancing through similars to the dissimilar. For the one resembles it through their common particularity, and the other is closely bound to it as a member of the same series, while the universal of the suprajacent series is unlike it in both of these respects. Now, Proposition 109 we'll find fits very well with 108. It's really just a clarification or a more concrete presentation of Proposition 108. They are basically saying the same thing. This one reads, every particular intelligence participates the first henad, which is above intelligence, both through the universal intelligence and through the particular henad coordinate with it. Proclus hasn't yet said much about the henads. Henad is a Greek transliteration that means oneness. The henads will be coming up soon in the text, but for now I'll just keep his terminology as we go on. All right, going on, every particular soul participates the universal intelligence, both through the universal soul and through its particular intelligence. And that's the example that I used for Proposition 108. And every particular corporeal nature participates the universal soul, both through universal nature and through a particular soul. So coming back to our examples, we'll see it's very much like what we saw before. A particular intellect can participate the first henad or oneness in one of two ways. Either through its universal, the monad, or through its counterpart in the series of henads. The next scenario that Proclus describes is the one that we diagrammed for Proposition 108. And this is a particular soul participating the monad intellect, either through the monad soul or through a particular intellect. Lastly, he shows a corporeal nature participating the monad soul. I'm using a tree here to symbolize this corporeal nature, but it's just a symbol, of course. And again, its participation is through one of two possible mediaries. And so the explanation from here is quite short. It reads, for every particular participates the monad of the supraadjacent order, either through its own universal or through that particular in the higher order, which is coordinate with it. All right, going on to Proposition 110, this one reads, the first members of any traverse series, which are closely linked with their own monad, can participate in virtue of their analogous position those members of the supraadjacent series which lie immediately above them. But the less perfect members of the lower order, which are many degrees removed from their proper originative principle, are incapable of enjoying such participation. Proclus seems to be tying up his logic here. We've seen the basic principle that higher terms extend farther. So, for example, being extends farther than life into materiality. So there are existent things that exist as bodies, but do not participate life, inanimate objects basically. And again, there are living things which extend throughout the realm of soul that do not participate intellect. We saw this principle in a few different propositions. For example, here's Proposition 59. Whatever is simple in its being may be either superior to composite things or inferior to them. And this is that idea that higher terms extend farther. So think again of inanimate objects. They are simpler than we humans are in that they participate a kind of being. They do have existence, one we call becoming. But they do not participate life or intellect. Or here's Proposition 70. All those more universal characters which inhere in the originative principles both irradiate their participants before the specific characters and are slower to withdraw from a being which has once shared in them. This one is very similar to Proposition 59. And this one also shows us that higher terms extend farther. So it follows from this logic that some orders are more numerous than others. But this creates a problem. If the orders do not have the same number of terms, then it would follow that some terms do not have a coordinate particular in the supra-adjacent realm, the realm just above. So do you see the dilemma? So we have to ask ourselves, how does this harmonize with propositions 108 and 109? Well, proposition 110 is Proclus's solution to this problem. He points out that members of a series that have fallen away from their monad have less power to participate the realm above them. And this makes sense. For example, universal soul can participate universal intellect, as can souls higher in the series of soul. But souls at the lower end of the series have fallen away such that they cannot actively participate intellect. Okay, so let's look at how Proclus describes this. He says, because the first members are akin to the higher order, in that their natural place is in their own order is higher and more divine, whereas the others have proceeded further from their source, and have been endowed not with a primitive and dominant, but with a secondary and subordinate rank in the series as a whole. So it necessarily follows that the former are conjoined by community of nature with the members of the supra-adjacent order, while the latter have no contact with it. For not all things are of equal worth, even though they be of the same cosmic order. Such terms are not in fact identical in definition, but are coordinate only as proceeding from and referable to a single common principle. Differing in definition, they differ also in potency. Some of them are capable of receiving participation in the principles immediately suprajacent to them, while others are deprived of this kind of power, losing likeness to their origins in proportion to their extreme remoteness from them. Okay, so there is a diminution in potency as you go from the top of a series down to the bottom. Proposition 111 is the implied result of Proposition 110. So Proclus explains, the intellective series comprises divine intelligences which have received participation in gods, and also bare intelligences. Let me pause for a moment. Proclus introduced the word henad in Proposition 110 without explaining what they are, and here he pulls in the idea of gods. He hasn't yet connected these two, so I think this is a little sloppy on his part. But he will later connect the henads to the gods. And so when he's referring to gods here, it's a reference back to the henads that we saw in Proposition 110. And so with that in mind, let me go back to the beginning. The intellective series comprises divine intelligences, and divine here meaning participating in gods. So divine intelligences which have received participation in gods, and also what he's calling bare intelligences, which from Proposition 110 we can assume means that they do not participate in the gods or the henads. There's also the psychical series, or the series of soul, which comprises intellective souls, linked each with its own intelligence, and also the bare souls that do not participate. Corporeal nature comprises natures over which souls preside, and also bare natures that are destitute of a soul's company. And so the explanation here, for all the members of any series are capable of being linked with the prior order, but only those more perfect members which are fit to identify themselves with the higher principles. And that's what we saw back in Proposition 110. So accordingly means this is what follows from that. Not every intelligence is attached to a god or a He-Nad, but only the supreme intelligences which have the most unity, these being akin to the divine He-Nads. And remember, He-Nad again means oneness. Not all souls communicate in the participable intelligence, but only the most intellective. Not all bodily natures enjoy the presence of and participation in a soul, but only the more perfect, which have a more rational form. And he ends by saying that the same principle of demonstration may be applied universally. And now I'm going to round out the set of propositions with number 112. And this one reads, the first members of any order have the form of their priors, meaning that the highest terms of each order are linked to the order above them. And the explanation here reads, for the highest classes in each order are conjoined with the supraadjacent principles because of their likeness to them, and because of the continuity of procession in the universe, so that they are endowed with a form akin to the nature of the supraadjacent order, and reproducing the attributes proper to it. The distinctive character of their being thus appears as a reflection of their priors. The significance here is that if the orders are linked together, then it can form a long chain, or at least metaphorically so. There's no gap in this unfolding of reality. And so with that, we round out this section of the text. So what Proclus has done with these first 112 propositions is that he has laid out the framework that will lead him into the next discussion, which you can see here is the gods. So that will be the next discussion for us as well. So I do hope that you'll join me next time. We've come a long way, but we're really just getting started. All of that was the setup for the gods. And so here's where it gets interesting. If you're finding the series helpful, please hit the like button and also drop me a comment. I'd love to hear from you.